Welcome to Arnie's Class Podcast. I'm Arnie Aniel. I'm an HR development consultant, an international public speaker, a workshop facilitator, a coach, and an educator. Life is a great opportunity, and we all learn life lessons every day. This podcast is all about those lessons. Lessons like gratitude, confidence, happiness, mindset, and a lot more. Learning without action is information. Learning with action is transformation. Join me, learn, and transform yourself into a better you. How many times have you heard the saying that nobody is perfect or nothing is perfect? And yet, some of us, we have that endless desire to avoid failure or committing mistakes. Some people set unrealistic goals and very high expectations, not only for themselves, but also for others. And they work relentlessly hard because they don't want to fail. Moreover, they are very quick to find fault and overly critical of their mistakes and other people's mistakes. And because of this behavior, a lot of them procrastinate because procrastinate out of fear of failure. And they don't take risks, they avoid challenges. Life mates, if you know someone or you yourself are actually experiencing this, please listen to this episode because perfectionism can lead to depression and more serious mental problems. So I hope that you'll be able to learn a lot from my special guests. Listen and learn. My special guest for this episode is very special. She is a licensed psychotherapist from Los Angeles who specializes in perfectionism, intuitive learning, and ADHD. I can't wait to hear her thoughts, experiences, and of course, her knowledge. Because in this episode, we're going to talk about perfectionism. So please welcome, Life Mates, my special guest, Abby Krom. Hi,
Hi, so
Abby.
happy to be
Welcome.
here. Yes, thank you for having me.
Yes. And of course, it's an honor when you said yes, because all my guests are all special because we learn a lot from the thoughts, the experiences, and the knowledge. And I'm sure this is even more special because I know a lot of people who are into perfectionism.
Yes, it's very pervasive. So if you relate to this, you're not alone. I mean, so many people struggle with it. So
Yes. Of course, people can Google the meaning of perfectionism, but we want to hear it from you, Abby, from
sure.
as a special person with the knowledge and experience. How would you define the word perfectionism?
So, yeah, I think people typically think of perfectionism as type A or highly organized, but really perfectionism is just unrelenting high standards. So, if you consistently have expectations that you feel like you can never meet, that is really perfectionism. And so, when you tell people that's the definition, all of a sudden, a lot of people realize, oh, that's me, right? Like I constantly feel like I can't reach all the standards in every area of life that I want to, like we're always, if we meet one, then another one comes up, right?
So, in all areas of life, not only one part of their life. So, whether it's
Right.
personal, relationship, it's perfectionism.
Well, and so some people can have perfectionism in one area of their life and not so much. So you could be someone who doesn't care about keeping your house tidy, but like at work, you'd really be upset if you made a mistake. Or you can have perfectionism where it kind of does bleed into every area of your life. I do think that it is kind of with you no matter what, even if it's not showing up as strongly in every area of your life. But generally, if you're struggling with perfectionism, again, if you meet your standards in one area, it'll just move to another area of your life and it will keep going kind of like, so if you're not aware it's there, it kind of just lives on, right?
Oh, wow. But which is more common, Abby? Is it the one that with only like some areas or probably only one area of their life or the ones who's like in all areas of their life? Which one is more common?
It's hard to say because I mean, I think it is more that if it's showing up in one area of your life, it's probably going to show up in other areas of your life. But it really depends, because perfectionism comes out of the areas we're most insecure about. And so it really depends on like what that focus was and what cultural messaging, what family messaging you got. So that's going to inform where you feel the most kind of insecure.
I see. But in your experience, Abby, is it more common among men or among women?
Mm. Um, I think it's very much in both. And I do think it shows up differently. So I think one of the like common areas I don't want to overgeneralize, but that it shows up for female presenting people is in appearance. And then for male identifying people, it can often show up in job, finances, career. And that's not because that's innately where our focus is, but that's where the culture focuses, right? The culture focuses in a lot of cultures on women's appearance and on men's like finances and ability to provide. So it's like where again more shame is tend will show up. That's where the perfectionism tends to go.
I see. Of course, I also want to ask about the LGBTQIA
Hmm.
members. Is
Yeah.
it also common among them?
I think it's common among everybody. I think it's common among like, there's really no group where I think there wouldn't be perfectionism. And so there's so many intersections, right? And so again, wherever perfectionism is a response to shame. So if you have many marginalized identities, then you are going to have more areas where shame might show up, right? So and then there's definitely like things like stereotype threat, or if you feel like you're going to be judged, again, you might feel that pressure that I don't want to make a mistake because I already feel like people are judging me or have a negative opinion of me. So definitely that can play a really big role, as if you're have one or more marginalized identities, perfectionism can become that way of feeling like a protection. But even though it feels like a protection, it often ends up being, a weight on people.
I see. So, how about children or young adults? Like I'm
That's
talking about like teenagers or the young children below 12 years old. Does it also happen to have that perfectionism?
absolutely. So I think it can happen throughout the lifespan, and it most likely we don't usually develop perfectionism as adults. If it's showing up in adulthood, it probably originated in childhood. And again, so if you want to think back, where did my perfectionism start, or where, it really is around the messaging you got. So for some, that will be family, culture, school. But it usually, yeah, like perfectionism is a result of our development. So it really is going to start, and you see it younger and younger, especially with social media and like kids having more access to comparison, that it's showing up. And, kids are being put in like, schools, competitive schools earlier and earlier. So all these environments would definitely foster perfectionism.
But do you see any increasing trend of perfection? Because
Mhm.
you see, everyone, we always say that nobody's perfect, nothing is perfect.
Right.
But even though we say that, and I think it's one of the cliche adage that you can hear everywhere, but how come, Abby, that perfectionism is still there?
Yeah, because I think it's an incongruent message. When we think about psychology, there's usually two sides to everything: the shadow side, the side we don't talk about, and then the side that we see, right? And so that is like, I think on one level, we all want to believe that. We all want to feel like I can be my authentic self. I don't need to be perfect. But we get a lot of incongruent messaging. So you often hear, oh, just be yourself, it's no problem, like you don't need to be perfect, but why didn't you get an A, right? So it's this thing of like, we're people talk out of both sides of their mouth, right? So and then we also, especially kids, and like as we think, we observe behavior much more than we take in what people are saying. So that's why these things feel cliche. So if your boss says, you know what, you can make mistakes, no problem, take it easy. I want self-care, but they burn themselves out and work 12-hour days and, beat up themselves or you if you make a mistake, then which one are you going to believe, right?
Yes, that's right. And just like what you said with the bosses, like someone, yeah, of course you can fail. Just take the risk. But once they fail, there you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Problems, judgments, comments. So now let's start with what causes, of course, you already mentioned it's part of our development, but what
Yeah.
are, in your experience, what are the main causes? At least three, Abby, that maybe we can concentrate since we don't have a day to discuss this. What are the three main causes or common causes of perfectionism?
Yeah. So the number one is shame. So shame is that feeling of defectiveness or not good enough that we all have and have all experienced. So it's one way we learn to protect against that terrible feeling of shame. Um, Another cause is societal pressures. And even like capitalism, because capitalism is about consuming and comparing and making you feel less than, so you'll stay in that cycle of
Yeah,
consuming.
agree.
And so, if I'm going to narrow it down just to three for now, then those are a lot of the factors in today's world that drive perfectionism.
Okay. With your clients, which one is the most common?
Well, I think everything starts at that feeling level. So, shame, I think, is the core of everything. So, because even the capitalism wouldn't work if we weren't shame prone, right? So, at the end of the day, it's just taking advantage of a system that already exists within us. And so, developing shame resilience is a really good way to protect against, perfectionism and even like the influences of things like capitalism or, consumerism and things like that.
Yeah. You mentioned about shame resilience.
Uh-huh.
How can they have that kind of resilience?
So it is a practice. It's not an overnight thing. But for instance, with perfectionism, like doing intentional failure, right? So a lot of us don't learn how to fail. We only are taught how to succeed. And then if we
That's
don't
right.
succeed, we feel shame. So, but we're all going to fail at some point. Every single person, every person you admire has failed a million times. So if we learn how to fail and actually plan for failure, that's one way so that is no longer a shaming process. It's like, okay, this is one of my failures, right? So a lot of this is also reframing the narrative. A lot of this has to do with the story we tell ourselves. So if I tell myself, okay, I didn't, run the track the way I wanted, right? And, I might be in a story of I'm not good enough, I didn't practice enough, all that. But if I can say everybody has an off day, right?
Yeah,
Everybody, the narrative I tell myself is going to really inform how deep I go in that shame pocket, right?
I see. Okay. So those are the three. Now, I'm sure my life mates, I call my listeners my life mates. Abby, I'm sure now they're listening and they're then thinking, am I a perfectionism or a perfectionist? Sorry. Am I a perfectionist? Am I under that perfectionism disorder? Things like that. What are the common symptoms? Because I don't want like the listeners will just think, yes, I'm a perfectionist. Everything is listen first and wait because we are very lucky to have Abby here to really explain when you're going to say that, yes, now it's
Okay.
being perfectionism.
So a big clue is what happens when you make a mistake. So if, making a mistake feels intolerable to you or like it's the end of the world, that's a big clue that you probably struggle with perfectionism. Some of the other symptoms are the way it shows up real world, because I think sometimes we read things on a list and it doesn't make sense for our lives. But what I see commonly is if you are constantly checking your work. So if you are behind in your work because you reread things every time you spend, time rewriting an email for, that, so excessively checking your work. Constant comparison is another. So if you're always comparing, if you're feeling good about yourself and then you get on social media and all of a sudden you're in a bad mood, that's a clue that there's like comparison at play, right? Which is one aspect of perfectionism. So it often shows up in these behaviors, constant reassurance seeking. If you feel like you need if people are saying good things about my work, I feel okay. If people are saying nothing or negative things about my work, I can't tolerate that. That's another clue that there's perfectionism.
Oh, wow. You just made me realize that probably I am a perfectionist.
Well, and here's the thing, it's so common, that's why it feels like, and it's not a diagnosis, right? So it's just a trait that I think it's a strategy really that we use to get through life, and again to avoid that painful feeling of shame. So it wouldn't surprise me if this applies to lots of people listening, but it doesn't mean that you have this like diagnosis, or that means, oh right, it's normal, it's part of being human, right?
But can we consider it a disorder, Abby?
I actually I don't consider it a disorder. I think it's a coping strategy, but it's a what we would call a maladaptive. So there's adaptive coping that does actually improve our life, and there's maladaptive coping that gets the job done in the moment. So like a good example of maladaptive coping is like drinking alcohol, right? So if, in general, you can drink alcohol and it doesn't mean you have a problem. But if every time you're stressed at work, you drink alcohol, that is not actually changing your life. It's not improving anything. It's not teaching you a new skill. So it might work in the moment and you don't want to judge yourself. So this is also perfect, right? Because we all want relief from pain. But the reason it would be a maladaptive coping strategy is that it's not really effective in the long run, just in the short run. So perfectionism is the same.
Okay. What is the worst thing that can happen if
Mm.
it continues until you grow old, like you're always on a constant mood of like, oh, I, I can't take it anymore and things like that. What is the worst thing that can happen?
Well, so it can lead to like severe depression. Like if you can't feel like you're never good enough, so we've seen this wave of athletes who have taken their lives, or like we saw Simone Biles have to like leave the Olympics. So, you know, sometimes if it gets too much pressure, it can really actually, instead of making you perform better, it can really make you want to give up on everything. Um, for people who have it till old age, we call it like rigid thinking, right? So instead
Yes.
of people who are more satisfied with life and can like be creative and do things in their life, they have flexible thinking, right? So yes, that was a bummer, I didn't do well, but it's okay because this, right? So I can like kind of see it in a balanced way. Rigid thinkers think it has to be this way. So if you ever had a relative that you could just tell they were very particular and you couldn't do it different and they were upset and you could tell they were annoyed, and think about what it's like to be around somebody like that. So those people might not have very good relationships because they push people away or they're
Mm.
judgmental. And it can also cause you to, I'm trying to think of, there's a way in which, if we don't share our vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
like think about someone who never says that they mess up, right? They only put on this like face that they do everything well and there's no problems. How connected, how much do you like being around that person? Like not very, you might
Mm.
admire them on some level, but you don't probably feel close to them. So it can really keep people from having close relationships.
I see. But is there any assessment or like a series of
Mm.
questions that people can take so they can really know that, okay, I'm a perfectionist?
Yeah. So, I mean, a good workbook would be, and, I don't know if you put links, but I can send you links to all this, but like the
Oh, please.
CBT, yes, the CBT workbook for perfectionism is great. And it's by an author, Sharon Martin. And if you go to her website, she also has some like assessments and worksheets. So if another worksheet you can find for free online is CCI, I think I'll send it. It's like clinical intervention something, but it also gives you a sheet to go through your, perfectionism behaviors and a checklist. So I'll send you those so you can put them in a link for your
Wow.
listeners.
Thank you. Thank you in advance. Now, Abby, we talk about the cause or the causes, and we also talk about the symptoms. Now, let's go to the positive side of it, the treatment. What can we
Yes.
do? Especially like, some people like, do I really have to see a psychotherapist just for
Mm.
this? Or can I do it on my own? Or probably, how can I help someone that I know? Like simple, I don't want to say treatment, but probably strategies
Yep.
that they can do?
Yeah. So things you can do again. So um, practicing, like we talked about before, like actually having intentional failures, like have a list of like 10, like I want to fill in my list of 10 failures. I want to fail 10 times, right? And now you're succeeding at that, right? So that can help our perfectionistic brain that like wants to feel like it's doing something, move in that direction. Um, Other things you can do is, start to challenge, like start to look at like, why do I think this is the way it has to be? Like, whose voice is this? Who told me that it has to be this way or that this is the standard? And also, who's benefiting from this? So again, like if I feel this pressure to change all my outer appearance, who actually benefits from that? Does my life actually get better? Because sometimes people do that. They change their whole outer appearance expecting their whole life to get better. And really, maybe people have made money off that, but like, has my life actually improved because I did these things? The other thing is to recognize, and so we can have these things, thought distortions. So we can have cognitive bias where we filter out the evidence against. So if you're thinking, but my perfectionism has worked for me, if I didn't have this, I wouldn't succeed. But it's like, how many times, right, have you over practiced, over rehearsed, done too much, and it's actually like wasted your time, or like you didn't really have to do all that work? And so trying to see, am I seeing this clearly, or is there any area that I'm kind of being blind to? Or like, so it could be to also ask people around you and say, hey, I kind of was listening to this, thing about perfectionism. Do you see like kind of any of this in me? Be kind, but like, do you think that this is like happening, and like what impact has it had on you? Because that can be one of the biggest motivators. Is sometimes we think, well, if I'm being perfectionistic, it only impacts me. But when you actually talk to your friends, your partner, your kids, especially kids, you can learn that like this is actually having an impact on those others around you. So that can be a motivator. Like, I don't want to put this burden on my kids or my partner or something like that.
Abby, I know you've met and you've helped a lot of clients with regards to perfectionism. Can you share one success story? Like, how long did it take? What happened? What were the symptoms? And what did you do? And then what happened? Or probably what is the current life of that person? You don't have to mention any
Yeah.
names.
Well, I do. And I want to be like protective of the privacy of, my clients. So I can give you like a general, because I have a lot of clients that have similar paths. So I'll give you kind of a general path in the way this can go. So a lot of, especially being in Los Angeles, I have a lot of clients that work high demand jobs that do struggle, with
I can
perfectionism and
imagine.
feel, yes, like, so that feel burned out, and they don't see that, the work that they're doing is contributing to how they feel, because they've also been rewarded for it. So again, there's somebody who's like benefiting, right? So if I do 10 times more of the work that I need to do, somebody might not mention that to me because they may be benefiting from the fact that I'm doing all that work, right? So there's ways that we get rewarded. Oh, you're such a workhorse. What would I do without you? So they've never looked at the ways it's being reinforced, but also they're not benefiting. So it's an unfair relationship. If you feel good doing 10 times the work and there's no issue, then that's okay. But then, so a lot of people will come to me and say, right, like, I feel tired. I feel irritated. So these are some of the clues that I'll start to look at, like, what's happening here? Why is there so much work going on that you're feeling this burned out? And then, so it takes some time to even accept, like, hey, maybe this is something I could change. So the first thing that happens with most clients is the fear that if I let this go, I'll be a failure. I'll be a couch potato. I will be homeless, right? So part of it is challenging the fear. So actually, like, working with clients and saying, so what tells you this is going to happen? If you did a little less work, if you closed your computer at 7 p.m., what's the evidence that you would get fired? Or has someone said that? Is that in your policy, right? Like, isn't that against the law or something? So it's starting to challenge their assumptions. And then most people feel to change their life, they need to take a huge risk. But what I've seen with a lot of my clients is you just need enough support to take little risks until they add up to a big risk. So the way I see this a lot, like a lot of clients have worked towards leaving a job that's actually unhealthy for them, or leaving because they're not able to do it in a healthy way. And so you don't have to quit your job tomorrow. So getting a therapist, getting a coach, having a mentor, listening to podcasts, whatever helps you like feel a little more encouraged, starting to take baby steps. Maybe you start doing 2 hours less work a day and you devote that towards maybe something you're interested in. And maybe, or you start saving up, you have a fund that's going to support you for 3 months so you can start to figure out what you really want to do with your life. Because maybe you realize, I don't even like what I'm doing. I just am good at it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I've seen people finally then get the courage to leave a job, make a plan. And it's really scary. But the best thing you can do for a fear is face it, because like rarely does the outcome, the worst case scenario happen. And once you experience that, nobody can tell you that. So exposure to a fear is like the best way to overcome it. And so that's what a lot of the treatment for perfectionism is whatever you fear, write down that fear scenario, like getting fired, make it your goal to get fired, because
Wow. I like that, Abby. You said like, yeah, make it your goal to be fired. Maybe in Asian context, the listeners like, wait a minute. Should I
And I
still?
will say, right, it's so scary, right? And it's different. I understand that there are going to be real life implications for that.
Yeah.
But even still, like, even if you make it your goal to get fired, you might not actually get fired. What I often see when people make it their goal to get fired is they do less work or this bad job they think they can't do, and either nobody notices or like that, and you start to realize like, wait, there was no like kind of scary monster waiting to get me. It's like I'm okay and I can figure it out. So use that advice cautiously, but like I do think that like actually getting exposure to your fear, and you'll hear people say that get fired that never wanted to be. But how many times you hear people say it was a blessing because I would never have left if it didn't happen.
That's right. That's right. And I like when you say that fear, the best way to actually conquer your fear is to actually expose yourself to those fears. And most of our fears actually never happen.
Right.
Never happened. So I remembered, Abby, the word workaholic. I'm not sure if
Mhm.
in the US, if it's very common, but in Asia, it's like a lot of people say, oh, I'm workaholic. So when you mentioned that a lot of people who actually experience or have that perfectionism, like they work. And in Asia, we say, yeah, I'm a workaholic. So what can we say to these people who consider themselves workaholic, but actually they are not thinking that it's affecting even their personal lives?
Yeah. So, and there is like actually in the same way that there's Alcoholics Anonymous, there's Workaholics Anonymous. So, I mean, you can literally go to meetings for this. I think whenever we try and convince, there's this acronym JADE, which is justify, argue, defend, explain. So when we get into trying to convince people that workaholism is bad, it's actually not a useful strategy because no one wants to be convinced of something they don't believe.
Yeah.
But we can start to mirror back what people are saying. So if someone says, I'm so tired, or I never have, so if they're not experiencing any consequences, then maybe it's not a problem for them. But if they're saying, I'm a workaholic, but it's not a problem, I'm so tired and I'm so, frustrated, and say, oh, like, so you're tired, you're frustrated. What do you think is causing that? Right. So we want to kind of like listen to people. I think actually just active listening and reflecting back to people is a useful strategy, because when people can hear themselves back or have to think about and reflect, they might think, well, I guess I am working 12 hours. Maybe that's why I'm so tired, right?
Oh, wow, 12 hours. And sometimes there are people, Abby, themselves, they don't realize that it's already too much.
Right.
But the people around them are all being affected, especially like couples or in the families. They don't even have time for their children. So what do you say about that? That everybody around them are telling, come on, you're already, it's not normal anymore. And we need you to be with us. But what do you deal or sorry, how do you deal with those people for them
Well,
to
so,
realize?
and this is why, as much as we want to convince people or tell them like we have to remember that perfectionism and workaholism is shame-based and it's fear-based. So telling them you're doing the wrong thing is just going to increase their shame. So first we start with, I would recommend starting with loving messages. Like, I love you, I miss you, I care about you, I know it's scary. So validating like how scary it is, maybe to let go of their work. The next level is boundaries and handing people back the natural consequences. So a lot of times we enable people. So if you lecture someone long enough, they will tune you out. So if you just
Oh,
say, I don't, right?
they
We
won't
all can
even
do this.
listen.
They won't even listen. So if you just say, you're a workaholic, they will just tune you out after a while because there's no consequence except the lecture, and people learn to just block you out. So we have to sometimes hand people the natural consequences. And that might mean, I understand this is going to be hard for you to work less, but I might not be able to remain in this relationship, or I might not be able to, or, I'm, not going to be able to keep doing your laundry or doing your, so whatever it is that you're feeling resentful about, or that like it feels unfair, we need to hand back people their consequences, because without consequences, it is really hard. So I think loving messages first. If loving messages don't work, sometimes natural consequences do. And so like, if we think about it, if it really is impacting you, then you're holding the consequences for that person. And so saying, I'm no longer able to do this, I need to give you back some of this difficulty that you're having me carry.
See, the other side of this, Abby, is like, what if those who are perfectionists
Mhm.
and they say that, no problem, I'm successful, I get benefits a lot from being perfectionist, so please stop, get away. So no, there are some people
Yeah,
that,
of course.
yeah, they say that I'm successful. I don't think there's a problem. I don't
Yes.
think that this is a problem. So what do you say to these people?
So that is where I would, if that was someone I was in relationship with and it was a problem, at least, for me, and it was impacting me, that is where I would hand back that person. So if someone's very defensive and unwilling to
Yeah.
change, and it's really hard, and that's a new fear, right? So for the person who needs to enforce boundaries, their fear is of being left, of not, being able to have that person in their life anymore. And I'm not saying the first thing you should go to is like cutting that person out, but I do think that there's only so much you can do on telling the person it's a problem if they're unwilling to agree with you. So there's a fear ladder for leaving, maybe like leaving a job or whatever it is, there's a fear ladder. So if your fear ladder is like giving someone boundaries, start with small ones, like maybe just, so first I would write down, if you're the person who's impacted by someone's perfectionism, but they say it's not a problem, write down the impacts on you, get really clear on what the impact is. There's actually an acronym, DEARMAN, and I can send you this worksheet as well. So
Thank you.
this can help you organize your thoughts. So describe the problem, just facts, no emotion, right? So it's not you're a workaholic and da-da-da. It's you've been working 12-hour days and I've been doing all the housework and childcare. Those are the facts, right? So no emotion. Then you're going to say how you feel about that. I feel really angry, frustrated, resentful that this is happening. Then in one sentence, this is where we get lost. You want to tell somebody in one sentence what you want or need. We often go into a big, long story about, and people don't get what we're actually asking for. So it may be, I want you to work 2 hours less. I want one sentence, super clear, right? And then say how it's not just beneficial to you, but how you believe it would benefit them as well.
Mhm.
And if they're unwilling, so that way that gives someone a jumping off point to say, I don't think I could work 2 hours less, but what if I could come home an hour earlier? Would that, so that you can negotiate, right? But a lot of times it's also difficult because we are so frustrated that we're not being clear in our communication. So it just ends up into an argument that's not very productive.
Exactly. Actually, when you mention about that in one sentence, you tell them what is the fact and then how you feel about it. And then what do you need? What is your, you reminded me of the nonviolent communication.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
It's very
it
similar.
reminded me. Yeah, that's a good one. But when do you think, of course, in Asian context, again, Abby,
Yeah.
it's not common for people to seek help from therapists,
Uh,
psychologists, psychiatrists, because we still have this mentality
Stigma.
that when you go to that person, you're not normal. Okay, let me use that word. You're abnormal. Something is wrong with you mentally. So it's not still like a normal thing for people to seek help from
Yeah.
therapists. But when do you think, or what is that thing that will say yes, you need help,
Yeah.
seek help from the therapist?
Yes. Well, I think it's even, and I think you can do this through your podcast, is like, so if we only seek help when we are at kind of the end of our
Yeah, the
rope,
end.
right? Then it's going to perpetuate that idea that like we only get help when we're at the very, very end of our rope. And that's the hardest time to change anything. So from a practicality standpoint, right, we want the easier thing. If you want to be in therapy for a longer time with more problems to deal with, then go when you're at the end of your rope. But if you say, hey, I'm starting to notice a problem, and you go early, you can actually go for less time and, turn the track of your life around earlier. So maybe, I don't know if this would resonate, but just from a practicality standpoint, going earlier rather than later is going to be helpful. And I'm always big, even here, it's like there's still a lot of stigma, and like people have a lot of worries about going to see a therapist, but I'm always big on try it, right? So this is how to overcome a fear. Go to a few sessions. I do say maybe go to one or two people, because like it could be the person's just not a right fit. It doesn't mean like all therapy or help is bad, but go at least a couple of times and see, do I like this? Do I want to keep going, or is
Mm.
it not for me? So at least you've tried. And that way, like, you're not going based on other people's idea of whether it's good or bad, but your own.
See, but how long does it take normally, Abby,
Hmm.
in your experience? Like,
Yeah.
not on the latter part, on the early stage of perfectionism, how long will it take for the
I
sessions?
And it's a very therapist answer. I mean, I can't tell you how long it would take, but because you never know if it's connected to all these other family
That's right.
traumas or,
Yes.
things like that. So it depends. But I do think that going earlier, or like when you're younger and things like that, some people, what I see will see in my experience, I've had people just come for like a couple months, or a few months, and feel like, okay, I have the tools I need and I'm good.
Mm.
I have people who thought they were going to come for a short time and now love therapy and have been with me for years, right?
Oh,
And so it's not
wow. Okay.
right. And so it's not a negative thing, right? They're like, again, this is really supportive. I like this. But so I've never had anybody who is like miserably with me for years. Sometimes they have depression or things that do go on for a long time. But if therapy is taking longer, it's usually because you're liking it and you're getting help, not because you're stuck in it,
That's right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
But when can they start saying that I'm getting better? What are the signs? Because we have the
So what
signs
are,
that
yeah.
that I'm
So what are the
perfectionist.
signs? Right. So what are the signs that things would be changing is that your self-talk is different. So when you make a mistake or when something happens that doesn't meet your standard, you're talking to yourself in a much kinder voice and less critically. You're taking risks. So people with perfectionism tend to avoid risks because they don't want to fail. So if you're taking risks, that's a clue that you're kind of moving away from perfectionism. And if you're trying new things, most people with perfectionism only want to do things they know they'll be good at.
That's right.
So if you're willing to take a class where you might bumble around or be the worst one in the class, that's a clue that, yeah, like you're not letting perfectionism run your life.
Okay. Abby, do you think that perfectionism is connected to motivation?
Hmm. So no, but I think we have that myth that it's connected. And so there's another version of like growth mindset, healthy striving. So that's the other thing. And it's important. Letting go of perfectionism doesn't mean you won't have any standards or try and get
Yeah.
better in your life. But I would say that's more growth mindset. So the idea that growth mindset is just the idea that I will fail, but I will learn something from every failure and I'll use that to move forward. And people who succeed and are visionaries and get to the top of the ladder, they're people that do that. They take their mistakes and they move on quickly. They don't sit there beating themselves up forever.
Yes. No, because I know someone and he shared to me that, Annie, you see, I'm a perfectionist and I'm not motivated because I don't have time. I don't think I can do it really well. I can do it
Yes.
100%. So that's why I asked you about the
Yes.
relationship motivation between motivation and perfectionism.
That's a perfect example. That's why it's a myth, right? So people think it's going to get you further, but what you actually tend to see is people stalling out. So even if at some point you felt it was helpful, because you're so afraid, people again who move forward, they risk things and they try new things. And so people with perfectionism get stuck. And so that's usually when people are coming to see somebody because they feel like I'm not moving forward in my life. And that's often the result, is it does decrease motivation and trying.
Now, there's a follow-up to that. Abby, another person said like, oh, I need, if I do something, if I reach at least 80%, that I'm okay with that, then it's okay. Do you think it helps for perfectionists that they set like, okay, 75%, it's fine, or 80% or 65%? Does it help?
Yeah, I think that can be helpful. I think it's even more helpful to set like a clear goal. Like, so what am I really trying to accomplish here? Right. So, that I think is more so like, even let's say you just want to pass your driver's test, right? And you need a 40%. I don't know. I'm just making up these numbers.
Yeah.
But so like, then it's like, then you don't need to do an 80%, right? So like, so if my goal is just to pass the test, then all I need to do, and so that's another clue with perfectionism. If you feel like it's not okay for me to just pass or just do the average, but so setting a goal and say, you know what, my goal is just to pass the test. So I'm going to do what I can to hit that goal. But yeah, so I think even like percentages can not be clear on like what we're trying to do. So just get clear on like, what is my goal here? And trying to actually, I do actually think we're so afraid of the word average,
Yes.
but like average effort gets us through so many things, right? Like how many people are looking at your like high school math GPA? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, where do I really want to expend my energy? And so it's like, if you love doing something, that's probably where you want to do your research and spend your time. But don't worry about getting perfect scores and everything on things you don't care about if you can just pass the class and move through with your life, you know?
Abby, you've shared a lot about perfectionism. You explained the causes, the symptoms, what they can do, even if they don't want to seek help from therapies. You, as a person, I want to ask, because all my guests, my podcast is about life lessons. And all of my guests, I always ask them three standard questions. And before I forget them, I want to ask you first. The first one, Abby. So with all your experiences meeting all these people with ADHD, intuitive learning, and perfectionism, what is the greatest lesson you've learned?
So I've learned so many lessons. I mean, I'll probably keep the lesson to perfectionism just because like it's something that I'm recovering from too.
Oh,
But I mean, I absolutely have perfectionism. Like that's why I can kind of get what it feels like. But I think what I learned is right. The biggest thing for me was get enough support to take the risk, because there were so many things in my life that I felt like I either needed to like jump off a cliff and have no safety net, but it's okay to like have a safety net or like keep your boring job while you're trying to launch into the next one, right? So I think it's, for me, like that was huge, just realizing I don't need to go in with like just kind of adrenaline only, and do this crazy stunt, that you can take risks with some support, and that just taking risks in life is like, I used to avoid risks because it was really scary, right? What if I failed? But taking risks is what makes life interesting and what helps you grow. And so risks don't have to be this thing where it's just kind of, I think we think of like, I don't know, investing in a risky stock or something like that. It doesn't have to be something like really extreme, but just something that makes you uncomfortable. And so take risks in life, because every time on the other side of a risk, I feel like it has paid off. It's just like, yeah, make it the right level of risk for you.
It's worth taking the risk.
It is.
And of course, sometimes you just have to change, just like what you said, the narratives. Don't say a failure, but probably you
Yes.
say a learning experience.
That's it. Yes.
Yes. Of course, we make choices, we make decisions on a daily basis. What decision you've made in the past that has a huge impact of who you are now, Abby?
Hmm. I think probably the decision to become a therapist. And like at the time, I didn't go to grad school. I wasn't really sure what I was quite doing with my life. But I think I was really afraid of not being creative. And so actually becoming a therapist made me fearful that like I wouldn't be doing creative work, but it
Mm.
actually feels like the most creative work I've done. And I was interested in it. So I think that like following my interest, that's always paid off. And especially as someone with ADHD, and I know we didn't talk about that much, but I think that's something I've learned, but I think it works for anyone, whether you have ADHD or not, is like follow your interest because it always leads you somewhere good, you know? And so I think that decision to follow my interest, even though I was kind of worried it would not lead to the right place, was like the best decision I could make.
Oh wow. About ADHD, Abby, I didn't talk about it because
Yeah.
probably I should invite you one more time because
Yes, it's a
I
whole
think
other.
yeah, because I think perfectionism deserves one episode and ADHD another episode because
Yes,
there are so many
totally.
details and there are many things to talk about. So if you are free, please let me know and I would be happy to have you again for
Sure.
ADHD topic. My last question, Abby. If you or someone else is going to write a book about your life,
Mm.
what will be the book like and what will be the title?
This is okay. This is kind of a funny answer. So I don't know if you know what the DSM is, but it's the diagnostic manual we use.
Yes,
So yeah, the
yes, that's
DSM,
right.
right?
Yes.
So I've always thought about writing a book called like My Life is the DSM because I meet so many of the diagnoses in the DSM. And
Oh wow.
so that is, I've thought about that this just recently. So as of right now, it would be a book of essays about all the diagnoses I meet the criteria for in the DSM.
Wow. I think it's already DSM-5, right? At the
Yeah,
moment.
DSM-5.
So
Yes.
probably yours will be the DSM-6.
Yes. I won't get around to it. Yeah. Probably till the DSM-17. Yeah. But yeah.
Abby, once again, thank you so much. I don't
Thank you
want
so
to
much for
take
having
so
me.
much of your time, but if you have a message, because you yourself is a
Mm.
perfectionist before, if there's a message that you can give to all those people out there listening to us right now about perfectionism, what will be your message?
Yeah. Let me think for 1 second. So I pull up a message. Um, I think it's, again, just if you're curious, try something. Like, just don't be afraid of trying because that is life. Life is literally just trying as many. Like, I think of life, we have so many experiences that we can have on this planet for the limited of time that we're on it. Try as many things as you can because it's so easy to get stuck in a job where you're doing the same thing for 40 years or, so even if you do that job for 40 years, try as many things as you can on your off time. And so if I leave any message, it's just try as many things as you can before you leave this planet.
Wow. Actually, it should be my last question, but Abby, because of your answer, sorry.
It's okay.
No, this is not my first time. Most of my guests, a lot of them said the same thing.
Mm.
Try as many things as you can in your life. But why do you think, Abby, that people are still afraid, fearful to take risks and try many things as they can?
Yeah, it is a fear thing, and there's just it feels like you're getting away with something. Like I hear this, I don't know if this is common in the US. There's so many companies that are now giving unlimited PTO, but nobody takes it, right? And
Yes.
it feels like learned helplessness. Like there's an experiment that happened a long time ago. It's sad because they kind of like abuse this dog, and then once they actually open the gate and let the dog out, it won't leave, right? And so I see the same thing with people. So there's so many ways in which we get our hand tapped and people get mad at us when really like maybe they shouldn't be, right? Maybe there's nothing so bad about what you did, but we get kind of slapped on the wrist so many times or get in trouble that when the gates are finally open and like you realize like this is my life, I get to live it, like nobody is in charge of my life but
Yeah.
me. We stay in the corner and we like are afraid to get our kind of wrist slapped. And so that's another thing to kind of pay attention to, like what outcome am I so afraid of? You know what I mean? And like, again, how likely is it that it happens? I tell people a lot that there's a lot of safety nets usually before like homelessness, which is where everybody goes, is like, if
Yeah.
I quit my job, I'll be homeless. But it's like, I actually encourage people, think through what would happen next. Like, would you look for another job? At what point when you're looking for another job, would you like maybe ask a friend for money? Then would you like, there's probably 40 things you would do before you'd really like be on the street. And I don't want to make it that like nobody ever becomes homeless,
Yeah.
but I think it's realizing whatever your fear is, try and take it 5 steps beyond. Like if your fear happens, what would be the next 5 things you would do? And that usually helps people because you're like, I guess I would just do this, this, and this. And you realize like there is steps to take beyond a worst case scenario.
Wow. Thank you so much, Abby.
Yes.
That's very nice. Very well said. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much, Abby. And I believe you should come back and let's talk about ADHD.
For sure.
I'm sure you can help a lot of people. Again, thank you so much, Abby. Life mates, another episode, another learning. And I'm sure that you probably is experiencing perfectionism as well. Learn from this episode, learn from Abby, because nothing is perfect and nobody's perfect. Say that, but please say that with actions, not just say that, but no meaning at all, and you're not practicing. The world is not perfect. You are not perfect. You deserve to be happy, and your fears probably is not going to happen, not even 1%. Take that risk and be happy with your life. Thank you very much. And until my next episode, listen and learn.